Hello and welcome to the 11th Scouching Report for the 2020 NHL Draft. Today we're going to be looking at our first defenseman of the year, Mr. Joni Jurmo of Jokerit's junior team in the Junior A SM-Liiga in Finland. Jurmo is a tall, left-hand shot defenseman with an absolutely gifted set of feet and a really solid pair of hands for a young defenseman. He's a guy I didn't really expect much out of going into this season, but the more and more I watched, the more and more potential that I saw with his game. He worked his way up to a top 20 ranking in NHL Central Scouting by the end of the year, and I think he's a player that could really surprise some people, not only with where he's drafted on draft day, but where his career might take him in the coming years. So the way we examine a prospect is we look at 5 separate categories: think, move, get, pass, and shoot. Within each one of these categories, we give them a number and a letter grade, where the number indicates the overall tier of consistency that I saw in the player across the 7 games that I tracked, with 1 being the highest tier and 4 being the lowest, and the number indicates the overall level of consistency within that tier I saw over those 7 games. First off, we look at the think category, and this is already where Jurmo really shows how raw he is. He is raw with all capital letters. I think for Jurmo, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and you're going to need to be patient with him, especially defensively moving forward if you really want to unlock the potential that he has. When he's hemmed in the defensive zone, he can ignore defensive coverage a little bit too often. He can be far too soft in front of the net for my liking and likely North American coaches' liking as well. In transition, he can relinquish a little bit too much ice to forecheckers, but when he played aggressively in the neutral zone, he was very effective at it with great mobility and a really good reach on him. Jurmo is a 6'3" defenseman, so to me, clearing the crease is something that you should see more and more out of a player that size. The tools are there for him to do it, it's just that I didn't see it a tremendous amount. And we'll get to the move category, but for someone with such great mobility, he was really reliant on dumping pucks a little bit more than he should have. There were times in the defensive zone where he had open ice in front of him with very little forechecking pressure, if any at all, and he would choose to either try to pass it to a teammate in traffic or just dump it up the ice and hope someone retrieves it. And at the same time, I saw him choose routes that might have been a little bit too clogged with defenders, and he might have bit off more than he can chew. So balancing the decision between when to dump it, when to pass it, and when to attempt a rush might be something that he learns over time, and I think that that would go a long way to helping him push offense a little bit more effectively. But on other shifts, he would skate right into a 1-on-3 scenario and use his mobility and his agility and his hands to just go around everyone. It was a little bit of a mixed bag in this category with him, and he was a bit of a hard player to read game in and game out, but I do think there's a really nice projectable talent here. So in the think category, I'm giving Jurmo a 2D. I don't think he's going to be a spectacular defensive defenseman, and I don't really think that there's a tremendous amount of offensive tools with or without the puck in the offensive end that really give me a lot of confidence here. But if he can choose to pick his spots a little bit better and be a much more effective player in transition, both offensively and defensively, more consistently, I think there could be a really interesting puck-rushing defenseman here one day. He's a long-term project, but the overall mindset around the game is certainly there. He doesn't take unnecessary risks. He doesn't chase offense tremendously often. It's just going to be a matter of refining his decision-making over time that will likely unlock the potential that he has. Next, we have the move category, and this to me is where at times things get spectacular. Of all of the defensemen in this draft, Jurmo may very well be one of the best pure skaters in this draft class for defensemen. And when you especially couple that with his size and the skill that he has with his hands, there's a fantastic profile to work with here just on his raw tools. And amazingly enough, Joni Jurmo dethroned Ronnie Hirvonen for the fastest blue line to blue line time in my tracking this year, breaking the 1.4 second barrier. He's fast but not the most agile guy around, but his hands are extremely high level for a player at that speed and at his size. It's really special to see. In 70% of offensive transitions, Jurmo maintained control of the puck. And when the puck was coming the other way in defensive transitions, he broke up 66% of those transitions. And a lot of that goes back to his skating. At his best, he can really close those gaps and keep them nice and tight and challenge with his stick. And on the offensive end, he's just a magical skater from time to time, able to go end to end with the puck and push very deep into the offensive end to create dangerous chances. He's got a big, strong, powerful stride, and once he wheels up in his own end and starts a rush on his own stick, he can be very, very hard to stop for defenses. One thing I did notice though was that early in the year he seemed to be taking a lot more risks, especially offensively, for better or for worse. He would take his rushes way into the offensive zone, go behind the goal line and try to set up more dangerous plays there. Whereas as the year went on, he seemed to play a bit more conservatively, stop up at the blue line, let teammates go in deep and try to set up a play there. Personally, I think he's the type of player that can get away with pushing deep into the offensive zone and just circling back on defense when a player that's covering him wants to pinch up higher in the offensive zone. But it certainly was worth noting that there was a little bit of a change in his game plan over the course of this whole season. So in the move category, I'm giving Joni Jurmo a 1C. It wasn't completely evident on every possible rush that it could have been evident on, and he wasn't the fastest guy I've ever seen all of the time. But when he starts getting moving, he can be very, very hard to stop. If he can work on his agility and work on his skills training to get even better than it already is, he could be a truly spectacular puck handler and puck rusher from the back end. He drove a tremendous amount of offensive transitions with control, and on the defensive side, he has the good mobility to at least clog up those transition lanes and those passing lanes and stop that play in the neutral zone before getting hemmed in defensively, where some of his weaknesses become more apparent. And having a little bit more explosivity certainly wouldn't hurt when he's hemmed in his own zone, covering the front of the net, and wants to stop play behind the goal line, grind play down along the boards from there. Next we have the get category, and this is where things might be a little bit counterintuitive. If you look at Joni Jurmo's height, you might think big physical defenseman, but to me he's much better with his reach and his stick, especially in transition. He has real inconsistencies, but also flashes of brilliance when it comes to gap control in transition, and also relinquishing way too much ice in the neutral zone and basically allowing controlled transitions without much interference on his part. His skating does certainly allow him to chase down forecheckers and grind play down along the boards if he feels the need to jump in, but a little bit too much of the time I found him to be too patient and allow too much to happen around him before choosing to strike. It made it a lot easier for players to get around him, especially in the offensive zone when he was a little bit too flat-footed defensively, waiting for something to happen before trying to make something happen on his own. And you can get away with primarily relying on your stick and being patient and waiting to choose your spots to strike an opponent, but at the same time, physical play is inevitable, and it did feel that from time to time, Jurmo actively avoided it. And next year he'll be with Jyp in the Liiga, so he'll likely be playing against men, and that level of physical engagement will certainly need to come a step if he's going to be as successful in the Liiga as he could be. So with more conditioning and experience, this should improve, but he's still a project in this regard for sure. So in the get category, I'm giving Jurmo another 2D. I don't think he's necessarily a poor player away from the puck at all. Shutting down 66% of transitions is absolutely nothing to shake your fist at. There was just a little bit of inconsistency in this regard, but again, with his mobility and his size, there's tons and tons of potential here. And if the puck did get freed up and he was the one to pick it up and start the breakout, that's when his game really, really shined. So this might not be an absolutely major part of his game moving forward, relative to how good he is at moving around the ice, but with his size and his ability to play in transition with his reach, I think there could be a nice defensive player here one day. Next up, we go to the pass category, and this is where things get a little bit greasy. In the first 4 games I tracked of Joni Jurmo, he completed 79% of his passes, which is great. However, in the last 3 games, that percentage dropped all the way to a 67%. His ability to complete passes and make those simple passing decisions to get pucks around the ice really seemed to take a step back as the year went on. But he can be a good puck distributor. He is pretty good at moving pucks into the neutral zone, but the completion rate is something that's going to need to solidify itself. You're really going to need to know what you're going to get out of him on a game-by-game basis, and there were flashes of him being a good puck distributor, especially early in the year. So I'm hopeful that he can recapture those completion percentages moving forward in his career. In the first 3 games I tracked of Joni Jurmo, he did show that tendency to push way up into the offensive end and try to directly set up a play deep in the offensive zone, which is something I'm always very curious about with defensemen and how projectable that is. But in the last 4 games that I tracked of his, he had no dangerous pass attempts, which goes back to that tendency to stop up at the blue line and let play develop around him and play that more traditional blue liner role. I'm not sure which version I personally prefer, but he certainly does show the capability of being a bit of a playmaker deep in the offensive zone if you allow him to do it. There was a lot of dynamic ability that he showed over the course of the year though. He was a good passer, especially making those breakout passes and especially early in the year. Rushing pucks up the ice with puck control is something that he's also extremely good at. Just refining that decision making, similar to picking his spots on the breakouts in the think category, is going to be something that I think he's going to need to do, and just goes back to just how raw he is as a player. So in the pass category, I'm giving Jurmo a 2C. It wasn't all bad here. He was a competent passer over the full 7-game sample. It was just a little troublesome to see those completion percentages drop so hard almost overnight. Taking a bit more time to survey the ice and read his options a little bit more clearly and make that quick passing decision when he sees the option present itself could take him a long way. He had his highest completion percentages when he was at his most aggressive, so that might be something that you try to recapture as his career goes forward. I think if you push him to be more of an aggressive puck rushing / playmaking defenseman, you could have something really interesting here. So if I'm advising him, I think he just has to settle the puck a little bit more, take a bit more time to survey the ice, see your decision that you're going to make and commit to it. And if he commits to it and it doesn't really go his way, adapt to it quickly. There were flashes of this with him during the year here and there, but there were some lapses, especially down the back half of my tracking work on him, that I definitely think will need to get rectified. Finally, we look at the shoot category, and for defensemen usually in these videos, I gloss over this pretty quickly. But it is very apparent that Joni Jurmo certainly likes to shoot the puck quite a lot. He had on average 3.29 shot attempts per game, and per 60 minutes at 5-on-5, he took 13.6 shot attempts. And to frame that relative to some other defensemen that I've tracked this year, that surpasses both William Wallander and Jamie Drysdale and perfectly matches Jake Sanderson. It's not necessarily a very hard shot from the point, but he is certainly able to keep it low to the ice and get it in front of the net. A couple of the points that I've seen him score this year were generated off of shots of his from the point, so it's not necessarily a bad thing I see out of him, but I certainly think that being more of that aggressive, offensive, playmaking defenseman with his mobility could really take him a long way. A little bit of explosivity to be able to step up deeper into the offensive zone, considering the vast majority of his shot attempts were from low danger, could be an interesting experiment for him. In the shoot category, I'm going to give Jurmo a 2B. While defenders who shoot a lot might spook people a little bit, I think Jurmo could be an effective shot driver as well as an offensive driver in general. But I also don't really believe this is going to be a central part of his game moving forward. It was pretty apparent that he did like to shoot the puck. If he can gain a bit more explosiveness in his first few steps and be able to really attack the ice in the offensive zone a little bit better, to maybe get some medium danger shot attempts mixed into the equation, I think there could be an interesting scoring defenseman here one day, but I don't really think it's going to be a pivotal part of his game moving forward. So we wrap up these reports with the best part of a player's game, the good part of a player's game, and the not so good part of a player's game. With Jurmo, the best part of his game is extremely simple. His skating in general is just magical. His hands are great for someone his size, but his raw speed and his ability to just get up the ice with control of the puck and maintain control of the puck is really, really special, and I think there's a lot of potential for anyone who can skate and control the puck like he can with the size that he has. In the offensive sense, there's tons of potential for a great puck-rushing modern defenseman. On the defensive side, he has great measurable results in defensive transition where he gets involved. If he can continue to stay involved in those defensive transitions on a shift-by-shift basis and relinquish less space more often on transitions, I think there could be a really, really good mobile defender at both ends of the ice here one day. The good part of Joni Jurmo's game is that when he is on, he is really on. He can be an aggressive offensive player who can push deep into the offensive end and make a play almost as if he's another forward. While his passing numbers did take a bit of a step back, he makes crisp, hard passes to his teammates, which is something that you need your defenseman to do. He can sometimes miss his target, but that's something that you can refine over time. I just liked the overall potential of his aggressive offensive package. Even when he wasn't rushing pucks up the ice, when he was relied upon as a primary defender for Jokerit, he really seemed to rise to the occasion and stand out. The not so good part of Jurmo's game is the inconsistency, and I think that's been pretty clear throughout this whole video. He looked defensively disengaged a little bit too much, even though of all of the high-level defensemen I've tracked this year, he has the lowest high-danger shot attempts against rate. And I think that goes back to Jurmo being one of these defensemen who is aggressive in the neutral zone most of the time, and would rather just not play in the defensive zone in the first place. The opposing team just didn't get a tremendous amount of chances to put pucks on net from high danger areas. But when hemmed in his own zone, he could be too passive with his decision making in terms of pinning guys against the boards or challenging with his reach, and his passing decisions at times was pretty poor. So these are things that I think will need to be refined over time, but they're not all terrible, because he does show good flashes in all of those areas. It's just going to be a matter of controlling his game a little bit more and making the better decision more often and doing it quicker. So overall, I'm giving Jurmo a 2B. The difference between Jurmo in 2019 and Jurmo in 2020 really can't be ignored, but his potential is really, really interesting. And to me, he's a player that you draft because of the risk that he has. His mobility is very, very hard to find. He is a great skater. One of the best skating defensemen, if not the best skating defenseman available in this entire draft, at least in a straight line. And to me, my ideal outcome is turning him into this aggressive, playmaking, offensive defenseman that he showed at the beginning of the year this year. He was one of the more exciting players that I've tracked this year. especially once he got the puck on his own stick in the defensive zone with his fast forwards ready to forecheck with him, and he just burned through the neutral zone with control of the puck the whole way. Not a lot of defensemen out there can do it at the speed that he does it, and I think there's a lot of projectability to his game, even if there is quite a lot of risk. So while I don't see him as an exceptional two-way player, he is more than competent in transition to shut down those transitions and stop play before it even gets into the defensive zone. And if he can be a nice crease-clearing guy who's at least competent and a bit of a pain to deal with in front of the net, then there could be more to like in the defensive zone. And with more explosivity in his step, he could get up to that top speed a little bit quicker, challenge forecheckers in the defensive zone with a little more aggressiveness to it, and I think he could be a very interesting player long term. I mean, the guy can straight out fly up the ice, he's got tons of skill, and while there were mental lapses defensively, decision-making lapses, whether it's breaking pucks out in too much danger or making poor pass attempts out of the defensive zone, and cutting down on the panicked dump attempts out of his own end, there's a lot to like with his game. And to me, he has all of the tools to become a potential steal of a defenseman outside of the first round this year. So that's it for Joni Jurmo's Scouching Report. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, you can click all the buttons you see below me so you never miss another one. If you really liked it, you could subscribe on Patreon, where you get access to data sheets for hundreds of drafted and undrafted prospects, early access to videos, merchandise discounts, and plenty other goodies. Or you could pick up some merchandise from the Scouchwear shop, where 50% of all profits go to the Women's Sports Foundation. So that's all, and thanks for watching.